Hey, I'm going to move again. What's up, is a culture detective here, investigating your favorite movies, and today I'm doing my second review of the day. Also, usually my background is lit up because usually I do reviews earlier afternoon, but right now it's like 9 p.m. Because earlier today, about maybe 3 hours ago, I went to the theaters and watched Kinds of Kindness, which is a new film written and directed by Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos. And fun fact, Kind of Kindness is formerly known as in AND, like and, but it was renamed to Kinds of Kindness. Also, this is the first film I'm seeing in the lineup of films that were in competition in the Cannes Film Festival this year, which is an information that you don't need to know, but I'm just saying it, okay? So, Yorgos Lanthimos is a director that needs no introduction. He is a director who is known for writing and directing weird movies with a lot of weird things happening and often involves a lot of sex and quite a bit of violence and often tackles relationships and family dynamics, which is exactly what this movie is about. Now, to be a little bit more calculated with this review, you can actually separate Yorgos Lanthimos' filmography in three different eras. First off, we have the Greek era with his first film Kineta and second film Dogtooth. I haven't seen Kineta, but I've seen Dogtooth. And in this era, he makes Greek films with this deadpan stiffness and again, lots of sex, lots of violence, and is bringing this weird new artistic twist to Greek cinema that otherwise the world have not heard of much outside of Yorgos Lanthimos in terms of Greek cinema. But in 2015, he pivots to English speaking cinema with the film The Lobster, which ends up being my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos film and also one of my favorite films of all times. It is absolutely incredible. So, this is what I would call Yorgos Lanthimos' Colin Farrell era, where we have The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Two films starring Colin Farrell that are incredibly clever and hilarious satire on relationships and family dynamics. Again, The Lobster is an ingenious masterpiece, and The Killing of a Sacred Deer is loved by some, disliked by some, but I loved this film a lot. It takes a little time to build up, but once it hits like a ton of bricks because it is morbid, it is strange, it is surreal, and the concept is so easy to understand, yet it's so messed up. Now, after this era, we enter the third era in Yorgos Lanthimos' filmography, and that is the Emma Stone era, where in 2018 we have The Favorite, and last year we have Poor Things. Both films also have a period setting, and both films kind of stray away from satire and lean towards a more literate, a more novel like flavor, where things sort of just happen and you just sort of have to go along with it without challenging the film too much. And while these films, The Favorite and Poor Things, are amazing in terms of cinematography and production design, I mean, Jesus Christ, Poor Things has some of the best production design I've ever seen in cinema. But I have to be honest here, I do prefer the clever but simple satire that the Colin Farrell era Yorgos Lanthimos has. Now we have Kinds of Kindness, which I believe is a film shot during the post production of Poor Things. And this is essentially Yorgos Lanthimos going back to the Dogtooth / Colin Farrell era, where we have more simple backdrops, a more modern setting, but it is equally as strange, unhinged, and weird. And that is really exciting. I really love it when directors go one way and then they're like, psych, I'm gonna go the completely opposite direction, or maybe go back to my older self where I make simpler, more modern movies. And it's actually incredibly interesting to see Yorgos Lanthimos having this allergic reaction to his recent success with, again, The Favorite and Poor Things. Now, that being said, though, Kinds of Kindness is not your average Yorgos film. It's actually something completely new. First off, it's not in Greek, and it's not in British English. It doesn't star Colin Farrell. It stars the usual Emma Stone and Willem Dafoe, but this time around we also have Jesse Plemons, who won Best Actor in Cannes, which is a huge freaking deal. Also features other actors, Margaret Qualley, Hong Chow, the list goes on. And also, this is an anthology film. This movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and it's actually 3 movies in one. The first one being The Death of RMF. The second one is called RMF Flies. And then the third one is called RMF Eats a Sandwich. And the only character that is consistent throughout these 3 stories is RMF, who just shows up and doesn't say anything and is barely a part of the story. But everyone else, Jesse Plemons, Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, they keep returning in every single story as different characters. Now, what I can say is that this film is noticeably way less stylish than many previous Yorgos Lanthimos films, and it's a little bit head-scratching because I was expecting him to go even further in this style, but in terms of production design, it's way less extravagant and lavishing. As expected, it is a modern setting and it's on a budget, but also the cinematography is less interesting. Like, there isn't as many zooms or as many fisheye lens as there were in Poor Things, for example. Another element of Yorgos Lanthimos' newer works that I kind of miss is awkward dialogues. And sure, there are a lot of awkward lines in this movie, but compared to The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, this is child's play. It could have been more awkward, and I kind of wish the dialogues are more awkward because they are where truly Yorgos Lanthimos shines. It's really strange, and it takes a lot of people hate a movie for its awkward dialogues. I love Yorgos Lanthimos films for their awkward dialogues. The awkward dialogues is essential to the strange alternate world that he paints for us. The music is also way less interesting. I was actually surprised to see that the composer for this film is also Jerskin Fendrix, the same composer for Poor Things, who did an amazing job with Poor Things, but in Kinds of Kindness, it's mostly just scarce bits of pianos, like off-kilter pianos, maybe a little bit of operatic vocal bits from time to time, but musically way less interesting than Poor Things. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it just makes this film less memorable for me on a technical level. Now let's talk about the stories themselves. Story number 1, The Death of RMF. It's okay. I think conceptually it is fantastic. It is about an abusive employer-employee relationship, or maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's about a guy whose life choices, every life choice, including what clothes to wear, what to eat, what car to drive, who to be his wife, is chosen by another guy. And in this case, it's about Jesse Plemons' character's life being completely controlled by Willem Dafoe, and there's a lot of emotional manipulation there, and it's definitely a story about power dynamics. And while that's interesting conceptually, I feel like the story doesn't nearly go as extreme or as insane as it could have been. However, in these 3 stories, the stories get crazier and weirder as it progresses. So 2 is crazier than 1, and 3 is crazier than 2. So the second and third stories are definitely the more memorable stories. The second one is RMF Flies, which is about Jesse Plemons after reuniting with his wife, played by Emma Stone. He believes that his wife is actually a fake and is actually an alien pretending to be his wife. And the real Emma Stone is somewhere still lost on a stranded island or something. And it's definitely way more fun and interesting. And also, I love the very dark and morbid ending to the second story that really haunt you. It's like a horror short in some ways, almost, which I really like. And then the third story feels like the longest to me and feels like the most convoluted because there's this cult, and the cult leader is Willem Dafoe, and this cult worships water for some reason, and then we have this side storyline where Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons are trying to find this girl who can revive the dead. And these two stories kind of intersect, but not really at the same time. And at the same time, the whole thing happens in the third story. RMF eats a sandwich, which, by the way, he eats a sandwich at the end of the movie in the post-credit scene or the mid-credit scene. And I'm glad I didn't leave the theater before the mid-credit scene. But yeah, what I love about Kinds of Kindness is that we see Yorgos Lanthimos coming into his own thematically, because at this point it's very clear that he likes writing and directing movies about family and relationships, but portray them with a lot of sex, violence, and weirdness. And he is very committed to that style and theme, and I really like that. One thematic similarity I keep noticing is purposefully hurting yourself or an animal. It happened twice in this movie, but if you go back to Dogtooth or the ending of The Lobster, and even I believe The Favorite, where Emma Stone was like hitting herself with a book, there's so many scenes in Yorgos Lanthimos' filmography where characters just hit themselves and hurt themselves on purpose or hurt animals on purpose, which is really interesting. Another motif in Yorgos Lanthimos' universe that I really like. This film is also very funny at times, even if it's unintentional. Like Willem Dafoe in a Speedo is just automatically funny. There is no punchline, there is no joke in there. Him wearing a Speedo and nothing else is just hilarious. Like, people around me are laughing when Willem Dafoe showed up wearing a Speedo. Also, Jesse Plemons sitting on a sidewalk, like a twink. Like that's really funny. Margaret Qualley getting injected with something, and she was like, "What the heck was that?" And then she just falls. Like, the comedic timing is just fantastic. So obviously the comedy of this film is its strongest elements, but I think the weirdness, for some reason, I just feels like it's really weird, but at the same time not enough. There's a piece of hair. This is weird. I feel like this film could have gone harder with its weirdness, but not in terms of the extremity of the weirdness, but more so with the purpose of the weirdness. I feel like a lot of the weirdness in this film is like weird for the sake of being weird, and unlike The Lobster, where it's weird but it makes sense, and The Lobster is extremely tight paced in terms of how it's a scene to scene, scene for scene, blow for blow takedown of marriage and relationship dynamics, whereas this film similarly addresses relationship dynamics, but it's more like we're in the 1900s or we're in the 20th century, where people make a lot of "ooh, my wife" jokes and "my husband" jokes, and it's not as clever as The Lobster. And yeah, I read an analogy from my friend, so I'm going to quote him. This is not an analogy made by me. And I quote, and he said, "The weirdness of this film feels more like Rick and Morty weird than Charlie Kaufman weird." And I think this analogy pretty much hits the nail right on. It's weird, but it's not weird with a purpose and with specificity that makes the weirdness justified and just hooks you in. It's just weird, but it feels a little hollow, which is why I'm asking a lot of questions like, why is there a cult? What's with the water thing? Why the twin sisters? Like, I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions in the third story, and I like unanswered questions, but I feel like it's unanswered questions for the sake of haha, XD, and not really with a purpose. And another thing with this film is that, for the most part, it feels very flat and hollow, which is normally a devastating flaw for a film. But I think it's fine because it is Yorgos Lanthimos in his element. But I just think that what he did with The Lobster or even The Killing of a Sacred Deer, is much more compelling, not only because conceptually it is way more interesting, but also we're just sort of swallowed in this alternate world. And finally, the performances are great. I think Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos works really well. Jesse Plemons is fantastic. He is delightfully awkward in this film. But there's just something about Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons being awkward and weird versus Colin Farrell and Rachel Weisz, who are equally awkward and weird, but sharp and dry. And when I was thinking in terms of actors, this is when I realized one thing, and that is Kinds of Kindness would have been a better film if it's British. Because Yorgos Lanthimos' humor works well when it's dry and sharp and yeah. So these are my thoughts on this film. What are your thoughts? I'm giving Kinds of Kindness a strong 6 to a light 7 out of 10. So have you watched Kinds of Kindness? Comments below, let me know, subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. This is a long review. Wow.